Welcome back to Beyond the Label. In this episode, we are focusing on two dynamic markets for Fair Trade Africa, and that is South Africa and Kenya. What are local consumers looking for, and how are brands responding? In this episode, we speak to Fair Trade Africa's commercial manager, Prem Naidu, Been There Coffee's founder, Jonathan Robinson, and Carol Karayuki, Fair Trade Africa's marketing manager. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to start with you, Carol, perhaps, and then just ask about what is the fair trade market looking like within Kenya? And then the same question I want to then pose to Prem about the market in South Africa.
All right. Thank you so much, Sandy, for having us in this great podcast. So I'll go straight in by talking about how the fair trade market looks in Kenya. So one, there's a lot. Awareness is growing. So we started this department about 4 years ago. And when we conducted a study, a consumer and business study, one of the things that came out strongly was we only had 4% awareness levels. So 4% was really low, very low awareness. Retailers didn't want anything to do with fair trade, or rather they didn't even know much about fair trade. But what we've seen over the years is, a bit of demand. So we are seeing retailers who are increasing their fair trade portfolio, either locally made product or imported product. Then the other thing we've also seen is when you look at licensee fees that are being paid from Africa, from Kenya specifically, that is actually growing. So that means there's demand for fair trade Africa, for fair trade certified products in Kenya. I would want to believe it's the same in other markets as well, but I'd want to also hear, Prem's experience from South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's quite a phenomenon that that people are traveling much more now, and they're traveling abroad to countries like Germany, UK, Sweden, and Netherlands, and obviously they are now exposed to fair trade and all the ethical labels. So when they return, the market is now opening up for ethical labels, and individuals are extremely happy to buy products like coffee, wine, which are very strong elements in South Africa. So I kind of support what Carol said in terms of we see it in the license fees, in the growth of revenue in licensing fees, and that's a good signal that the market is slowly accepting fair trade products and ethical products. The challenge is that it's very small and it's very slow at the moment, and we're hoping to gain some momentum over time with increasing our awareness levels.
Thank you. Jonathan, from Been There's perspective, how are you working? What is your relationship with fair trade? And then relate that to markets, please.
Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much for having me. I think we are about to celebrate 20 years this year.
Oh, wow.
Of being there, we have been buying fair trade coffee for 20 years. So it's definitely, it's part of our DNA, part of how we operate. I don't think we sort of know any other way to do business. We believe that we certainly believe in the model of trading fairly with people, regardless of certification. Actually, it's it's built into our DNA, how we treat our customers, how we treat our suppliers, how we treat our producers. Just honestly believe it's an amazing way to do business. And so, I think for us over the last 20 years, I'd say it's definitely is growing. And I know when I first used to tell people that we did fair trade coffee, they'd say, "Oh, free trade." I'm like, no, let me explain. There's a difference. And so I think over the time, we certainly, the fact that there's been Rooibos and wine and chocolate and coffee and stuff available on the supermarket shelves has certainly broadened the appeal and scope and awareness of fair trade over the last years. And so, I think now when I talk about fair trade to consumers, they don't look at me blankly. They definitely know what it's about. I think for us, we would love to see more, coffee companies embracing fair trade. I think ultimately the costs are still prohibitive. It just means that you have to pay people fairly, and people don't like to do that. So they like the idea of paying people fairly, but when it comes to actually doing it, then sometimes that's a little harder. And so, the concept is greater than the application. And so, I think we've got so much awareness is there. I think the products are there. There aren't nearly as many as there should be, to be honest. Especially since the last 20 years, we should have more competitors serving fair trade coffee in South Africa, and we don't really. And so, I think we got a long way to go, but we definitely have also come a long way. So both of those aspects.
Yes. Thank you very much for that. So I know that you touched on something in terms of we still don't have enough of that. And I think one of the things that I'm very aware of is that, like when I travel to Europe, you see fair trade products everywhere. When you are on local ground, you'll hardly ever see them. And I think there's also been the issue of the global south being producer nations and the global north being consumer nations. I want to hear from you, perhaps, Prem. What do you think is the change? Has there been changes, and what do you think made that switch for people? You said that people here are now more aware and want ethical products. What do you think caused that switch?
If you look at what you've just mentioned, that the South is a producer piece, and the global North is the consumer shopper piece. But in saying that, the producer piece has grown significantly across wine, Rooibos, and especially Rooibos being totally unique to the South African landscape. That producer piece has grown significantly, and the producers start talking to their people and their network of people. And hence, it has been spreading by word of mouth. So awareness is very slow, like I mentioned earlier, though we've got to create a lot more awareness now that we've got a bigger team within Fair Trade Africa and Fair Trade International. And there's more emphasis on the South to South, where we sell to the South versus always selling to the North.
Okay. Thank you very much. Caroline, I wanted to find out from you in terms of markets. So what do you think is the biggest block when it comes to South, and why people are not as actively buying as you would in the global North?
All right. I think that's a very good question because, one, as you rightly put, there's a lot of production, sustainable production happening here in Africa, but we are not consuming our own product. And when you speak to a lot of consumers from research and engagement and all that, price has always been issue number one, barrier number one. So unfortunately, until sustainable production is, we are able to fix the cost of sustainable production, sustainably produced products will always attract a premium as compared to other regular made products. And so what happens is when you look at the shelves today, when you look at a sustainably produced coffee or wine versus a conventionally produced coffee or wine, it will probably most probably be a little bit more expensive. So price and the issue of cost is a really, really big barrier. And unfortunately, Africans are very price sensitive. And I don't think it's an Africa thing. I feel like globally price sensitivity is catching on. And so that becomes an issue because it reduces the number of people who are able to buy sustainably produced products. So I'd say that is one of the biggest barriers. However, we also need to appreciate that we don't even have enough products on our shelves today. So you realize that the products that we have that are sustainably produced, say fair trade as licensed products, they are only in very few outlets. And so for me, the one thing I've always hoped for to see is, big retailers actually changing their portfolios and saying, you know what, I'm converting my coffee portfolio into fair trade, or I'm converting my wine portfolio into fair trade. Because that's what Europe is doing. So you're seeing your Aldis and, your Co-ops converting their categories. And until we have enough availability on the shelf, we'll always have an issue. So for me, I'd even say at this point is, calling on big retailers, your ShopRites, who have, they're in I think close to 15 countries in Africa, your Woolworths as well, your Carrefours, who are also in like 15 countries in Africa. If we got those to actually commit and say, I would like to convert my coffee category into sustainably produced products, then we'd have more availability and hence more access to these products. So I think of those two. So there's price sensitivity, availability, and obviously awareness. Like I think Jonathan and Prem have both mentioned, a lot of awareness is needed. So we definitely need to do a lot more consumer campaigns and all that good stuff. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Jonathan, with Been There Coffee, I wanted to know, do you find that there is a market, a need, a demand for fair trade certified coffee? I know that you say that you've been doing fair trade coffees for 20 years, which, interesting enough, this year is also fair trade's 20th year. Do you believe that there is a demand for fair trade certified products?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do think there is. I think we've been talking about fair trade. It's definitely has always been part of our sort of I guess probably part of our marketing strategy. People understand it, they love it. They love what they hear, they want to be part of it. I was just in Rwanda last week, and at the fair trade cooperative that we work with, I took my sister for the first time, who had never seen it, and when she was absolutely blown away. What this cooperative has done through the fair trade premiums is truly remarkable. They are the transformation that has happened in their community is just miraculous, actually. And so I think that once we tell that, and you share the stories and you explain to people what the impact is of fair trade, it really is something that people just want to get involved with. They see the difference. They can hear what it means when you give people margin in their lives, when you don't just take a product at its absolute lowest price, that you pay a fair price, and that you add on these fair trade premiums that enable people to just transform their communities. And so I think once people understand what it's about, they are keen, and they're keen to get on board, and I think they do buy in to it. I think the challenge we have always found over 20 years is telling our story adequately. I just think that it's hard to tell, and the best way to tell it is probably one person at a time. It feels like sometimes, and so I think I'm sitting in our training center in our cafe here in Johannesburg, and if I had to go downstairs now and ask interview all the tables there, I reckon at least half of them wouldn't even know that we're fair trade, and they just people are living their own lives on their own phones, going about their own business. Once they discover it, that's then they can get excited. But to try and cut through the noise times of all that we deal with as human beings, and all that we're presented with at social media, at news, etc. I think that's for us has been one of the one of the challenges. But once people get excited and understand it, I think they really get behind it. So yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yes,
but,
yes, you have. Thank you very much. CK, just around visibility, like Jonathan touched on telling the stories, and I wanted to know in terms of fair trade stories, do you believe that we are telling the stories enough that people know what they are buying into, why they are spending the money that they are spending, and if not, what can we do differently?
Very good question. So we do have a lot of stories, but we need to find a way to engage the consumer. Like, how do we touch the heart of the consumer? So when you look at how other, fast-moving consumer goods are doing their campaigns, they're really touching onto the heart of the consumer. So obviously our story is we need you to do good. We need you to consume responsibly, because when you consume responsibly, then a farmer back home or, in whichever country is paid fairly, a worker somewhere is treated better, a child gets a chance to education and all that. But the big question consumers will ask is, so what? How is that my business? How is that my business? So we really need to, for me, we really need to have campaigns that really touch to what the consumer cares about. So it's not just telling a story, it's telling a story, but touching onto the heart of the consumer. Because ultimately, unless the consumer really, really loves a brand, they will always look at price again. So on a shelf where you have 20 brands to choose from, why should they choose the brand that has fair trade on it, the fair trade mark on it? They need to really, really understand why, and they need to know why. For sure, I am sure all of you on this table, and I think Jonathan also alluded to that, a lot of people will keep asking, what is fair trade and what does fair trade do? What does fair trade even mean? And unless we unpack it in a way the consumer understands, then we are still, in a fun way, first of all, in a memorable way, in a shareable way. I love the power of social media. Like, social media is the one place where you will talk about anything, get information about anything. So unless we are able to tell our campaigns in fun, exciting, memorable, engaging way, we'll still be the fair trade certification, as opposed to brands that actually do good and consumers want to buy. So yeah.
I love that. Brands that do good. I think that maybe that is something that fair trade needs to look into versus just a certification label. It is a brand that does good, that changes lives. Prem, from you, I want to know, how do we, from a commercial perspective, because I do realize that we need to get the numbers, but how do we connect the numbers with impact?
I think before I answer your question, I want to go back to the previous question you asked. And while Carol explained it brilliantly, I think there's a very big piece in terms of how we marketed fair trade in the North and how we should market fair trade in the South. They're very different market dynamics there. And obviously, fair trade was or is almost 30 years old in the North, and it's generally in its teens. It's just broken its teens here in the South. So the challenge is, how do we package something that's relevant for the market here in the South, considering price? I mean, price has come across quite a few levers here. In the South, it's actually even more crazy in terms of everybody is talking price because there isn't disposable income. Now, to go to your question, you want to repeat that question, please, Sandra?
Yes, I want to know, because we need to sell, right? But how do we connect the numbers to impact?
Yeah, what's important with the impact is that we can package that into something that works and relevant for the South. In the North, it kind of works very easily and well, and there's great offtake. Here in the South, we've got to convince our buyers at retail, because at retail is where scale happens. And we can package that to relevance here in the South to create that impact in and scale for fair trade products.
Okay.
I hope I've answered your question.
Yep. Thank you very much. For me, I think we need to, I think just to take together what you all have said is that it is not just about product, but it's about people as well. And it's about impact as well. And I think with fair trade, what sets us apart, obviously, is the premium. And so a lot of lives are being changed through the premium. And so we need to be able to tell those stories so that consumers know why they are buying what they are buying. I wanted to know from Jonathan, and I'm not sure if this is the right question for you, but I would be interested to hear from you. How do we convert conscious buyers to fair trade buyers?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Because I think sometimes people, you're right. People are conscious consumers, but they're actually not always aware of perhaps that sort of link to fair trade. I think one of the things that people often ask me, why do we, why? I mean, we obviously just operate a ethical business, and I think there's a lot of people, there's a lot in that where people say, oh, when I deal with ethical companies, but without this, without the certification, there's no audit on those companies. And I think probably that's the key thing, and that's the key message that I often convey to people as to why we are, because they'll say, well, you could just do this with producers and work with producers, because I travel and work with our producing communities directly. Why do you bother with the fair trade certification? And I said, well, because otherwise you just have to take my word for it. And I think there's a lot of companies out there who are saying that they are, ethical companies, that they are, conscious of the planet, that they focus on sustainability, whatever. And to be honest, there are obviously some that fall in that category, and there's some that are just using, the sustainability buzzword, the greenwashing, if you like, whatever, just to sort of wash over whatever they're doing. And nobody ever is auditing them and checking actually that what these companies are claiming is actually what they're doing. And I see it in our organic certification. I know of some of our competitors who just put organic on the side of a bag. And I know that I've seen their roasteries. I know that they don't separate conventional from organic. So without the boundaries and the certification of something like fair trade or Rainforest Alliance or organic, whatever, there's no one really watching that and confirming that what you say that you're doing as a company is actually happening in reality. And so I think that is certainly what I say to some of our potential customers is that, the certification is important, because otherwise you're just taking Jonathan's word, and as maybe as convincing as I may sound, I may not be right, and I may not be honest. And therefore having an independent party, I think is key. And I think that's why certifications are key. They just hold us accountable. And so, I think it's really important.
Okay, thank you for that. I do acknowledge and realize that auditing is probably the way to make sure that who you are dealing with are ethical and they are sustainable and they're taking care of the environment and of the people, because they're getting audited against that. So, thank you for that. I want to know, in closing, from all three of you, what do you think policymakers can do to support ethical trade, especially within the global South? From Caroline, I want to know specifically East and Central Africa, from Prem, Southern Africa, and from Jonathan, if I could just have general, what do you think policymakers can do to support ethical trade? We'll start with Carol.
All right. I think policymakers have a huge role to play in promoting sustainable production and consumption. Because one, like I mentioned earlier, sustainable production is still quite expensive. So if we got policymakers to, I know we hate the word subsidize and incentivize, but unfortunately sometimes it is needed. So if the government would be able, and other policymakers rather, would be able to actually subsidize and incentivize responsible and sustainable production, then that would actually promote the same. I'll give you an example. A while back, we attended a meeting with manufacturers across East Africa. And the one thing that came out strongly was a lot of them want to convert into sustainability. And that includes packaging, it includes raw material and all that. But the issue they raised was we do not have enough alternatives for sustainable packaging in East Africa. And so they have to import sustainable packaging. It's expensive. It is attracting heavy tax. And so then that, of course, translates to the final product at the final price on the shelf. And so if the government then would come in and say, we are providing you with, subsidized, or we are going to give a subsidy on tax for, packaging, for instance, then that would encourage more of that. But even beyond that is also, even in their own procurement. So government, I don't know whether it's the same case in other parts of Africa, but at least I know in Kenya, government is the biggest customer for any business. So they procure the most. So if governments then would be able to prioritize sustainably produced product in their procurement. So they are saying we are going to, we are sourcing coffee for all our offices. We are sourcing tea for all our offices. Can we prioritize sustainably produced coffee, sustainably produced teas, etc., then that would actually encourage a lot of producers and a lot of businesses to do the same. So I feel like there's a lot that can be done. Right now, we know the AU is heavily pushing sustainability when you look at Agenda 2063. So when you look at governments have, the opportunity right now to align their strategies, their trade strategies and all that to the AU's Agenda 2063, then that way they are actually promoting sustainable production and therefore consumption in the country. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prem.
Thanks, Sandy. I think much of what kind of makes sense is for really government to support this ethical label and sustainable label agenda. There's an opportunity to obviously use their muscle in terms of tax incentives, almost like lowering the barriers for these businesses to run and to function. There's a huge opportunity in education. There's a lot's required in terms of training and learning and endorsement, which obviously increases the consumer trust and demand. There's also there should be a lot more support for SMEs, and this makes it more inclusive in terms of driving this type of agenda. It also aligns ethical trade with national priorities. I think, in Africa, we've got a lot going on, and the opportunity to develop the people and environment are there.
Yeah, I think I probably touched on it before, but probably the two things is that, I think from a policy point of view, I think obviously I don't want to use the word policing, but I'm not quite sure what other word to use. It'd be great if we could have some good policy in terms of just, verifying, sustainability claims across the board. There's no real consequence for, someone putting organic on the side of a bag and popping it on the shelves of the supermarkets. And they really should be, if it's not organic, or fair trade, you shouldn't be able to claim things that aren't verifiable. So I think from a policy point of view, that'd be great. And then I think just both Carol and Prem both touched on the fact that I think the support of policymakers and obviously government in that case of just supporting fair trade and just almost making that as a standard to which you have to conform when you're there's tenders out for any sort of, government contract. So, I suppose if we're really serious about getting money into the hands of small scale farmers through fair trade premiums, we should say that that's the minimum requirement in terms of our procurement within government. Where the coffee is sourced should be really important if we're serious about it, because that is how you make a difference to the poor. If you pay people fairly, it's amazing what they will do in terms of investing that within their own lives and in their own communities. It starts right at that producer level, just giving a person a fair price for the product that they produce. And if we do that, I believe that it's one of the most powerful vehicles for transforming communities and just delivering income into people that need it. Trade is so much better than aid. We know that, and that's been shown so many times. So yeah.
And so, from Jonathan's mouth, trade is better than aid. And I think that is what we need to remember within our African context, is that our approach for consumers should not be the same as that for the global north, because we are unique in our approach, we are unique in how we consume things, we are unique in how we spend our money. So we need to understand where our money is going.